All right, first thing I need to talk to you about is, well, what the whole idea of this is to talk to you about how computers operate. A lot of people look at computers as being this mystical object and they don't know how it works. And some people figure they never will. Well, you want to know something? That computers are not a whole lot different. As a matter of fact, they work pretty much the same as things you've known all your lives and what we have had in existence for 200 years. For example, I'm sure most of you have heard of Morse code. You're all pilots. Probably most of you have heard of Morse code. Well, I'm no expert on Morse code, but and I don't happen to remember my Morse code from my military days, but we'll just say the letter A is something like dot, dash, dot. The letter B is dash, dot, dash, and the letter C is dash, 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 dot, something like that. All right. I don't know that that's the correct symbols for Morse code, but that's the idea. Morse code is made up of a series of dots and dashes, anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6, I forget, separate parts to make up an individual character. ABC, 1, 2, 3, period, whatever. That's what Morse code is. And so what we've done with the telegraph lines for 150 years, probably closer to 200 years, people have used a magnetic device attached to a wire that goes over long distances, and on a magnetic keypad, they tap out Morse code, and that's how we had communication. Strange as it may seem, that's all computers is. Okay, fine, it's jazzed up, it's a lot smaller, a lot more compact, it's a lot faster, but you know something, it's basically the same thing. I'll show you how. All right, we have our Morse code, but to make the point, what we're going to do is, instead of having this Morse code, we're going to make up our own Morse code system. All right, but what we're going to do is we're going to make it up so that instead of a random number of parts to it, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 parts, dots or dashes, we're going to make them all 8. Everything is 8 parts. So let's say the letter A would be dot dash, dot dash, dot dash, dot dash. The letter B is dash, dot dash, dot dash, dot dash, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we'll say C is like that. And we have all the characters we can possibly think of as some combination of those dots and dashes. ABC, 1, 2, 3, period, space, exclamation mark, colon, semicolon, everything is made up of those 8 dots and dashes, right? So far that makes sense to everybody? Same as Morse code, we just came up with our own Morse code. All right, let's modify that a little. Instead of calling them dots and dashes, let's call them, on and off. So we'll say that the dots are on, the dashes are off. On, off, on, off, on, off, and so on. Okay? So rather than calling them dots and dashes, we're going to call them switches that are either on or off. So we've just modified our Morse code a little bit. Same thing, we've just modified it. All right, now, how could this possibly work as communication or through computers? All right, let's take an example of a couple of kids that live next door to each other. They live on the second story, their room windows are facing each other, and they're not supposed to talk when it gets late, and they don't want to talk, so their parents don't hear. So they come up with this ingenious little system. They make themselves this little 2x4, and they put light bulbs on it. That's a light bulb. These are still light bulbs. I went into computers because I can't draw. Okay, so we have this 2x4 with 8 light bulbs on it. All right? Now, here's what happens. Johnny and Susie, living across from each other, decide they want to communicate. They know they have their own Morse code system set up. So what they do is they turn on and off the lights in order to send individual characters. So Johnny wants to send the letter A. He's, I don't know, telling about this friend named Andrew or something or other. So he wants to send the letter A. So he turns this one on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Leaves it on for a moment, and then turns them all off and switches them on. It switches them to the correct sequence again. But Susie across the hallway got this information, looks on her sheet and says, oh, that's the letter A, and writes it down as a letter A. Does that make sense? Anybody have any problem with that? Okay, pretty straightforward. That's about it, all there is to it. Okay, now let's expand on that a little bit. Let's say, rather than just 8 light bulbs, we go out to someplace like, the Mojave Desert in California, and we put millions and millions of light bulbs out there, billions of light bulbs, okay? And we put them on and off in the right order. Every 8 is another character, right? And we turn them off and on and off in the exact sequence we want. Space shuttle astronauts fly overhead, and if they had a telescope powerful enough to read it, they could read a book that we put in there, just one character at a time with all those lights. They could do that. You can see that, right? Anybody not understanding that? That's all there is to it. All these lights, 8 at a time, being a separate letter, even spaces, and periods, spaces, paragraph returns, everything. All of that there. Now, we take all these light bulbs that are taking up many, many square miles, and we shrink them down, shrink them down, shrink them down, shrink them down, shrink them down. And instead of having something that's as big as a whole desert in California, we have something that takes up about that much space. So instead of all those light bulbs that are on or off, we have just a bunch of switches that are on or off. And those switches have been compressed down to something that size. So now we've got something that size that has a billion switches in it. Okay? Anybody know what that little thing would be called? Yes, sir. A CPU is a type of one of those things, so you're close. Yes? Well, again, same thing as a central processing unit. That is a type of one of those. Yes? Same thing. Yes? That's better. Microchip, microprocessor is a type of microchip, or integrated circuit is the typical name, or chip. Okay? So we have a billion switches inside there. How can those switches all be inside there? Okay, that was a good question, whoever asked it. Instead of little light switches that you have on the wall, what you have are chemical switches. And the way it works is inside there, these switches that are not much more than a molecule in size, they are very close together. And when the chemical comes together, the switch is closed and the light bulb is on. When the chemical gets pulled apart, the switch is open and the light bulb is off. So, closed, open, or on and off. That's all that happens inside there. And yes, all technology has bought us was make things smaller. So instead of having all those millions of light bulbs out there, or vacuum tubes, right, that we used to have, if any of you remember that, we now have switches and made them that small so that we have that many in such a tiny little spot. There are some positives and negatives to that, which we'll come to later. But since we're on this, in this area, we need to get a few terms nailed down here. We've got these parts of a character. Anybody know what each one of these, again, we're referring to the on or off, each one of those switches is called? Nothing? Yes? No. There's one part of it, all right? I'll bet you'll know it when I write it. A bit. Okay? Each one of these switches, on or off, dots or dashes if we want to go back to Morse code, is a bit. Okay? So, if we have 8 bits, that's equal to 1 character. Or what's the other term for that? Byte. 1 byte. So 8 bits is a byte. 8 bits is 1 byte. Okay, and a byte is a character. ABC, 1, 2, 3, period, space, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Well, obviously 1 byte is not a lot of information, so we've got much larger numbers or terms to deal with. So when we get up to 1,000 bytes, what's that called? Yes? Nope. Nope. It's probably because we don't deal in these small numbers anymore. Kilobyte. 1 kilobyte or KB. And this is 10 to the 3rd. The next one is 10 to the 6th, which is 1,000,000 bytes. What's that? Megabyte. 1 megabyte or 1 MB. And the last one I'm going to write out in its entirety is 10 to the 9th. That's 1 billion bytes. What's that? Gigabytes. 1 gigabyte. 1 GB. All right. I'm going to stop writing all those zeros now. What do I do with my black one? There we go. The next level is 10 to the 12th. I have a reason for going all this way, and we're going to go a lot farther up. What's that? And I have to look it up. Oh yeah, terabyte. I knew that one. 1 terabyte. 1 TB. The next one is 10 to the 15th. Yeah, what's that one? Anybody know? Say again? I don't blame you. 1 petabyte. And the next one is 10 to the 18th. That's, oh. Anybody know? No. Can't say I blame you. Exabyte. And then we've got 10 to the 21st. Zettabyte. And the last one I'm going to tell you is 10 to the 24th is 1 yottabyte. All right. Now, why would I bother giving you all that kind of information? When are you going to use that? Well, I'll tell you. The first time I started doing recording these presentations was about 25 years ago. And I think the first or second video that I did, I was talking about hard disks that went up to like 80 megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes. And on that tape, I said, oh, you won't ever need more than that. I never lived that down. I have said we're probably never going to get into gigabytes. I have said, oh gosh, we're never going to get into terabytes. I personally have, right now at home, I've got about 20 terabytes of hard disk space at home. You can buy a 1 terabyte hard disk and it's not stopping there. Will we get into petabytes and exabytes and zettabytes and yottabytes? I don't know. But I do know that for 20 years I have been surprised almost every week about how far we come. So I'm not letting that happen again. Those are the different terms for the different amounts. I hope in our lifetime, well, your lifetime, that we get up to yottabytes, but then again on another idea, I kind of hope we don't ever get that high. But we probably will. Okay. So those are the different types or different sizes. I just got through talking about what an integrated circuit is and how they're made up of all these switches. But we have two main categories of integrated circuits. Anybody know what those two main categories are? No? One of them's RAM. Anybody know the other one? No? ROM. RAM and ROM.